Greetings puppets, FiOth here, and in this video I'm bringing you my first whole build for New Game Plus. This was done by collecting certain pieces of equipment and combining them together with specific P-organ upgrades to create a high crit gameplay approach. Everything will be explained, and I am going to give you a specific level cap that you should be aiming for, because I went beyond that initial level that I was when I finished New Game. I will not have you fumbling around trying to figure out what kind of stats I am using. Everything will be listed. So without further ado, let's get to it. For ease of access, let me remind you that as of patch 1.2, you can go to the gold coin fruit tree and you can reset P-organs, Legion arms and levels without needing to go to the Saint statue. So this is a quality of life improvement, and I have to thank the devs for it. Traveling back and forth was not the optimal solution for respecking. We will start with the gear, and I suppose that at this point you are familiar with what you can get in a new game of Lies of P. As I said, this is for going into New Game Plus, so we're gonna need stuff that drops up until the last moment of the game. If you wanna know how to find specific pieces of this build, I suggest you look them up in a wiki, because listing everything here or showing everything's location is gonna take 1,000 years and I don't wanna waste your time. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this thing. First and foremost, we are using the Proof of Humanity sword. This is the weapon that you get by killing the first puppet, the very last and optional boss that you find in a playthrough. What's great about this is that the base damage is good, it has a 30% critical rate, and you can also go for technique with it by altering the handle, bringing its technique scaling to A and motivity to C. We are not gonna invest in motivity whatsoever, that's not the target stat here, but technique we're gonna raise quite substantially, so having this alteration done on the sword is gonna help it. C is not anything to scoff at, have to be totally clear about it, but to the level that we're going for, there's gonna be very little leeway when it comes to the stats distribution. If you use this build and keep leveling, you can invest in motivity and get even more damage out of it. Our first ring is the Blue Guardianship Amulet, and it is actually the Ring of Favor and Protection. That's pretty much what it is. Increases max amount of HP, stamina and legion. We want this hands down. Our second ring or amulet, I'm gonna call them amulets since the game calls them amulets, is the Extreme Modification Amulet. Increases weapon attack in proportion to number of Fable slots. We have the max number of Fable slots available up to this point, so we want this for the extra damage. Then we want the Assassin's Amulet, 100% one of the most integral part of this build because it increases critical attack, the damage dealt by crits that is, and then Awakened God's Amulet increases Fable Arts damage inflicted on a staggered enemy. Because we're using this, you can probably see where I'm going on with the P-organs. We want to perform at least one execution of our Fable Art before we go in for the lethal strike when the enemy is staggered. Now, what happened with update 1.2 is that they increased the leeway for weight whenever you drop a point into your capacity. So if a point was worth, let's say, 2% of weight, now it's worth 3% of weight. And that allowed me to put even heavier armor, or let's say frames and parts, on P and make him that much more durable. So we're going with the Lada F350 frame. I am using the Lada large capacity insulation converter here, but what you have to do according to the enemy you're fighting is swap between this, the insulation, the radiation, or the corrosion resistance converter. The reason I'm using this as a default is because it offers the best physical damage reduction. As you can see, this is a little bit weaker, last a tiny bit, and this is again just a tiny bit weaker when it comes to physical defense, but it is what it is. You might survive a fight with 1% HP, so why the hell not? When you fight specific things that cause, let's say, acid or fire or electric damage, you want to have resistances according to that. Then for the cartridge, we're going with the Lada Disruption cartridge. This is heavy AF, 11.7 units, but the physical defense is by far the best. If you scroll through everything, you can see that this is optimal. It was impossible to fit it in with the previous stat requirements, but now I have some room to spare for slightly heavy, so I am using it. Last one, we're using the Lada Spaced Armor Liner. This you get by purchasing it from Venini's Mojodromo, the puppet here in the hotel. It has one for strikes, one for pierce, and one for slash. I go for strike usually because most of the middle of the road enemies will hit you with blunt objects, but in specific fights where the enemy is using sharps or pierce, it's self-explanatory that you swap in between them. Now for the stat distribution, you can see that I am level 108, but this is not what you need to be able to have this build done. So I'm gonna list the stats here. Capacity at 30 at this point, I don't think it's even a requirement. I think you can go for 28 and just get those 2 points and spend them on something else. But as I said, you keep leveling and you keep leveling fast in New Game Plus, so any micro adjustments you wanna do, you're gonna have a much easier time doing. For me, as I increase specific things, I witnessed an improvement on the overall performance of the build, and that's to be expected. Mixing and matching specific stats, of course, gonna make your life easier, and you can always respec at the tree or the statue to get a little bit more damage out of the build or get more hit points out of the build, and so on and so forth. If you ask me, now that we have more leeway when it comes to weight, you could go for some more vigor. Don't go beyond 25, it soft caps at some point and gives you very small returns, but going about 25 vigor, I think it's pretty optimal, and you might be able to pull one extra dodge or one extra attack. It's very important to have high stamina, as long as it's not a detriment to the entirety of the build. Now, when checking PO organs, things are a bit different. It doesn't have to do with farming ergo, it's all about what you find in the environment. There's an argument to be made between the game containing 28 or 29 quartzes per playthrough. I got 27 and I know I made one mistake and I missed one. So I usually think it's 28, but people say it's 29. I haven't double checked to verify. If you know something about the definitive number, leave it in the comment section below. This is pretty early in the game's life cycle, so we're still discovering other things. I'd like to know what you know in case I miss anything. I'm gonna give you the most important ones so you can get started though. In phase 1, get Link Dodge, very important. Increase pole cells, we're gonna get this every time that we can. Add Fable slot, both for our amulet and the overall utility. A Rising Dodge to get you in optimal position when you're raised from the ground. Increase pole cells 2. Add amulet slot, 100% needed. Increase pole cell recovery 2. Add amulet slot. Add Fable slot. Perfect guard cause stiffness. Increase special grindstone uses, exceptionally useful, and I'm going to explain why in a bit. Enhance pole cell recovery 3. Now in every single one of these you can socket specific upgrades. I'm gonna explain what we wanna do here. We want to increase our stagger by stagger related upgrades like enhanced stagger for charge attacks like this, or for ambush stagger like this. In defensive, go for getting more cells and better cell recovery, as well as a reduced damage whenever you are dodged. So if you're caught mid-dodge, you get less damage on your person. What I would avoid initially is lower damage taken or guard damage, or increase your attack or reduce stamina consumption when in a discharged state. That means that you don't have any pulse cells to spare. This gonna be good for a late New Game Plus or New Game Plus Plus when you pretty much exhausted this list to an extent and you're just using min-maxing options here. What you want to do up to this point is make sure you have as much healing as you can get and as many different defenses as you can get so you can survive easier. Getting last resort options is not the way to go in my humble opinion. Correct me if you have the info to do so. Last but not least, we have to check our grinder. There are various options when it comes to the grinder, but what I suggest is go for the Satisfaction Grindstone. Temporarily increases weapon critical rate. If you use this, you will be getting crits in about 4 out of 5 attacks. I can't demonstrate it with specific numbers, but I've been using it extensively and it is very, very effective. What this will allow you, of course, is larger damage output, and you'll get the enemies in that staggered state that you want that much faster. When they get into a staggered state, you use a Fable Arts and go in for the lethal attack, and that will optimize your damage output. We are using the puppet string. I showed the opening gameplay. This thing is nuts. Upgraded, it allows you to do this very impressive volt attack that damages stuff around it, not just the specified target, deals a shitload of damage, and will allow you to do surprise and close gap attacks with enemies that are unaware or cannot attack vertically. Be advised, after a certain point in the game, enemies will feature uppercut attacks that punish your puppet string volt. So don't overindulge yourself, pace your attacks, and know what to expect when you're going in for a kill. So this is it, puppets, my very first build, crit focus Severance, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is a pilot vid when it comes to builds for Lies of P. I don't want to know what kind of traction this is gonna get. If you enjoyed it, sub, like, hit the bell for more content like this. Let me know if you have any suggestions, and until next time, be well, stay frosty, and always strive for perfection. Cheers!